Hi and welcome everyone. I'll continue trying to read my script and let you in at the same time, but if apologies if there are any hiccups. I'm Julia Sanchez, a translator from Portuguese, Spanish, and Catalan, and a member of the translators collective Cedilla and Company. We're delighted to be collaborating with the Center for Fiction to bring you this monthly series and are grateful as ever for the center's support. These translation clinics are intended as knowledge-sharing open sessions for translators and lovers of translation from all backgrounds and experience levels. Each month, we invite a different literary translator to present on or discuss the subject of their choice, usually with a Cedilla member, though this month we'll be shaking things up a bit, followed by a Q&A with attendees. Topics may range from questions and theories of craft to submissions, contracts, and other practical concerns, always with an eye to literary translation as a profession. Attendees are encouraged to bring questions from their own practice. These sessions will be recorded and available for later viewing. Live captioning is also available. You can click on the CC button on the bottom menu for various options. We invite you to turn your camera on if you like, and settle in for the conversation, during which everyone except Bruna, Dantas, Lobato, and Jennifer Shyue will be muted. Feel free to add comments and questions in the chat, which I will be moderating tonight. For the second half of the session, we'll open the conversation. If you're comfortable speaking on screen, raise your hand either by clicking at the bottom of the participants list or by using the reactions button, and you'll be invited to unmute your microphone and ask the question yourself. Or if you prefer me to read your question, please send it privately to Cedilla in the chat. We'll try to get to all of them, but we apologize in advance if we run out of time. For those who are unable to attend our live events, we encourage you to email questions or comments before or after the sessions to translationclinics@centerforfiction.org. We hope to make these conversations ongoing to include viewers in as many time zones as possible. Now let's dive in. Today we have the good fortune to hear from Bruna Dantas Lobato and Jennifer Shyue. Bruna Dantas Lobato is a Brazilian writer and literary translator based in New York City and digital marketing and communications coordinator at Words Without Borders. Her translation of Caio Fernando Abreu's Moldy Strawberries is forthcoming from Archipelago Books in April 2022, and a translation of Giovanna Madaloso's Tokyo Suite is forthcoming from Europa Editions in the fall of 2022. Jennifer Shyue is a translator focusing on contemporary Cuban and Asian Peruvian writers. Her work has been supported by fellowships and grants from Cornell University's Institute for Comparative Modernities, Fulbright, Princeton University, and the University of Iowa. Her translation of Viceroyalties by Julia Wong Comte is forthcoming from Ugly Duckling Press's Señal chapbook series. She can be found at shyue.co. Tonight, Jennifer and Bruna will talk about how to maintain a sustained practice of translation, especially if translation is not our only commitment. Together, they will discuss hobbies, community, staying organized, and making a living. So over to the two of you. Go ahead.
Thank you so much, Julia, and thank you to the Center for Fiction and Cedilla and Co. for this wonderful series of talks that I've loved tuning into. So yeah, I guess tonight we'll be chatting as we usually do, Bruna, but in front of an audience. And I'll just start by laying out everything that Bruna does, just so we can all get a sense of how much there is. So she's writing a novel. She's translating novels by 3 Brazilian writers. She's teaching translation through Catapult. She's serving on the ALTA American Literary Translators Association Board of Directors and Conference Committee, and she also has a full-time 9-to-5 as the digital marketing and communications coordinator for Words Without Borders. So I guess my first question, Bruna, is how do you do it all?
Yeah, now that you said it that way, maybe I should quit some. That would be a very long answer. I think it's a combination of giving it my all for as long as I can, and then also knowing when to say no and take a step back and saying, this month is not the month for that. and knowing my priorities really well. And depending on the time of the year, I'm going to have different priorities. Since college, I remember doing something like this. I would have a list of most important class to least important class, so that if it's, a weekend and I got to choose, I will give my time to the class that I care about the most. So it's a little bit like that. I'm like, okay, this month it has to be novel stuff, and I will figure out the translation stuff in a couple weeks. And then I do this every week and hope for the best. Yeah. So some things do fall through the cracks. I think that's important to admit to. Emails that I've been meaning to reply to since 2017, etc. But for the most part, I try to hang in there.
Yeah, for sure. Can you tell us what your days look like? Do you divide them up in a certain way, temporally or spatially?
Yeah, so for 2 years, I was a full-time freelancer. Struggling freelancer, at least for the first year, and then a full-time freelancer for the second year. During that time, I could pull all-nighters, and I'm definitely a night owl, and I like to work late at night, doing my own thing. So I could do that, I could read all day and then work at night and then sleep in the next day, etc. So that was one way to think about it. I would try to do my work for money during the day, and then I would write into the night or something like that. But now that I have a 9-to-5 job, it looks very different. Mostly I need to have my evenings to myself and to be really protective of them. If I watch a movie at night, that is going to be the thing I'm going to do that night, or if I go out for drinks, that will be the thing I'll get to do that day. So yeah, I have to be very deliberate about how I spend my days, and also very deliberate about the weekends. And holidays are the most precious. I don't really celebrate any holiday, but I couldn't be more thrilled Thanksgiving's coming up, for example. I have a little bit of time to catch up on my other work. I do like to, instead of being like, oh, I have to write, boohoo, I try to think about it as a job. I have to go to my other job after job number one, and taking it seriously like that and having that kind of commitment with myself and knowing how many hours I'm putting in has been very helpful, because the easiest thing to do is not to write, not to translate. That is the first thing to go, right? So yeah, I try to be very committed to myself, and I've tried various methods of logging my hours, and mostly I forget to log. But the way I have a Corkboard where I keep track of the documents I'm working on right now. And then, I take them off and put them in a little pile as I'm done with them. That kind of keeps me focused. Right now I'm working on I'm translating a novel that has 35 chapters, and it's due December 1st, right? So I know more or less how many chapters I need to do per week. So I go stacking the flashcards and trying to make sure I'm on track more or less. So all of this to say, very haphazardly, that is how I organize my days based on what fires I need to put out that particular week. But yes, it is true. 9-to-5, I'm at work. At home, I work from home, but I do have to be logged in. And then, I do my other job, and then my other job. I also have a family. I have a pet. Yeah. Can I ask how you structure your days?
Well, right now, not terribly well.
Yeah.
But I do try to, one of my gigs is doing essay mentoring for college applicants. So I try to cluster the meetings I have with students on like a set number of days. So, that doesn't sprawl and take over my whole week, I think. Yeah, I think your point about, because I think it is, translation can be, obviously there are deadlines when you have a delivery date, but it can be very, like, it's not going to be like someone's going to be over your shoulder being like, hey, did you translate your X number of pages today? So it can often be very easy for it to be the thing to slip away when there are more immediate demands. But I like your tip for, thinking of it as a job that you have to log hours for every day too.
Yeah. And because if I could, I wouldn't do any work at all. Even if not working makes me sad. I love working, right? But it's very easy not to work. It's wonderful. We get distracted having fun. So I found out very quickly that I need my tasks to be physically visible. If it is out of sight, I won't remember to do it. So I used to keep track of all my translations just on my computer or in a notebook that I would close and put away. That didn't work. And hence the corkboard, it's always staring at me really large. And I have each chapter gets its own post-it note or flashcard or whatever. And yeah, it's definitely if it's nighttime and I'm like, okay, I can just sit back. I look at it and it looms really large. Then I remember that that's what I gotta go do. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Mhm.
And literary translation, I guess, specifically is notoriously underpaid. Do you have tips for how to both translate and, put food on the table, make a living?
Yeah, well, I did give up the freelance life. So my advice would be don't do it. Well, do it if you have the right, the kind of personality, that would be okay with some uncertainty. You might have a lot of work now, but you don't know for sure you're going to have work tomorrow, and you kind of have to live that way. I don't think I have the right temperament for that as someone who is anxiety prone. But yeah, so what I did was to get really involved with the translation community and the literary community in any way I could. Julia Sanchez, actually, who introduced us, gave me this piece of advice when I asked her, how did you become a freelancer? She said, you just got to tell people that you're available for work. So I emailed every press, really, and I said, if you need anyone to do readers' reports or revise or copy edit, you name it, anything from Portuguese to English, I am available for work. And some of them did write me back with opportunities, so that was nice. I also told all my friends, and some of them did send me opportunities as well. Yeah, so I think, the real advice there is just be shameless and ask for help and tell people you need work, given that this is very much an industry based on who you know. You just got to make use of that.
That makes sense. Yeah, I was going to ask this later in the conversation, but since we talked about community, you've been an important part of my translation community since we met in our MFA in literary translation at the University of Iowa. And being able to, turn to you to ask questions, get opinions, or just commiserate has made my translation practice all the richer. Can you talk more about the role of community in how you sustain your translation practice?
Yeah, I don't think I would have a single gig without the community that I have. And I didn't always know people, I just had to kind of start showing up. I will show you the first time I published something. I published a review of this book, also translated by Julia, and Ellen Bursach, Water the Blind Man Dreaming by Noemi Jaffe. So I wanted to get more involved. So I wrote a review of this book, and then my blurb was in there. And that made me really happy. I was like, oh, I wrote something and it's inside a book. It's not the book, but it's in it. Yeah, and then applied for fellowships, things like that, and then the invitations started to appear for an event here or for something there, and some of them did pay. Yeah, so you just show up, I guess, not waiting for an invitation and being buddies with people. That's pretty much it. I also going to the Alta conference was a really important experience to me. I had Zoe Perry as my roommate the first time I went. She offered her hotel room in the Alta conference Facebook group, saying that she needed a roommate to split the costs. And I jumped at the opportunity because I already knew her translations. So I met her there. And then when she would go to dinner with people, I would tag along, and yeah, very much that is how I've gotten every gig I've ever had, including this one, talking to you right now. It is very important. And also okay, I saw someone in the waiting room for a second there. Without the community, I don't know that there is much purpose to what I do, or that I'm just releasing a book and throwing it into the ether and then what? It is very much going through the process of actually translating it and the conversations that's going to come in my own immediate circles out of that book. That is why I really do this and what I do it for. Yeah, so find the translation friends that you've always dreamed of. They'll help you with your gigs.
You mentioned Alta. Do you have any other, for people who don't feel like they have a translation community yet, how would you recommend finding that?
Well, you can sign up for all kinds of classes online these days. There's the Catapult one with the Kenyon Review and the Bread Loaf workshop. All of those, that's an easy way. But you can just email your aunt and cousins, and create your own community of it. It doesn't have to be someone in a PhD program or anything like that. It can just be you and your family or you and your friends. The same way that I guess you'd form a garage band, you just form your own workshop. For translators of color, I found an incredible community in the BIPOC Translators Caucus that has been wonderful and a great place to ask questions and commiserate. And ask who is a good person to work with, and who pays and who doesn't pay, or who will take 2 years to pay, both the practical things, but also just keeping your morale up and making sure that you're doing things for the right reasons and not for not having your name on the cover, that kind of thing, etc.
Yeah. And if I may, I would like to shout out your class that you often offer through Catapult, which, I have not taken myself, sadly, but I've seen the preparation that goes into it, and I know a lot of work goes into that. And that seems like a great, like classes like that seem like a great way to form community, obviously with your instructor, but also with your, fellow emerging or wanting to grow more translators. So for sure.
Yeah. And all my former students, the last day of class, they turn into colleagues, right, immediately. And then I run into them at Alta or some other place where I'm a student and they're also students, and we switch roles. I think that is very much how community should be like. Yeah.
Definitely. How do you stay organized? Tools?
Yeah. Well, I'm not very organized, but I do a combination of extreme note taking. I write everything down. Like I made a decision for this child's nickname kind of thing. I might leave that somewhere really prominently. Otherwise, I will forget that that's what I named her, and then she'll have a different name in the second half of the book kind of thing. I also use a Scrivener, which I know not everyone does, but it is helpful for me personally, and a book stand and all of that. I also have recently, a few months ago, I got this really gigantic screen I'm looking at now. It's great for split screen because then I can leave, my list of concerns or related vocabulary just open in the corner as well. I also have a big timer thing that I adore my timer. It's like a cheap thing I got at the dollar store. But I also put alarms on my phone. So I'm like, okay, it's where I am, it's 6:21. I'm like, okay, I can't translate a whole book. That it feels like a lot, but I can do 20 minutes. So then I'll put the timer, or I'll set up an alarm for 7 p.m. or something like that. So that is very much how in fact, I structure my time off as well, which is really sad. I know it sounds but it is very easy for me to just become a couch potato, and then I will be sad that I didn't do anything, So I also set up timers and alarms and things like that. I'm also thinking about the question you asked earlier about, I don't know if you asked the question, but you talked about making a living as in an industry that is so underpaid. I also think that I should mention that a big part of that is valuing your work a lot and not doing things for half the rate that is right for you just because you need the gig. Of course I've done that before. I've been unpaid interns at many an independent publisher, but I try not to do that anymore and really value my labor. That is also part of how to make in this industry. And also, I'm not very picky with the jobs I take. I've done the most boring gigs, editing the most ridiculous things, and that's fine by me. Of course I can't do it all the time, but yeah, I will definitely edit your manual or translate your lecture. I've done a lot of interpreting for universities. If any of you out there on top of translating can also interpret. It is so high paying compared to translation. So when I was full-time freelancing, I would do one event a month and I might get $1,000 an hour. So I would do 2 hours and that would be $2,000 right there. It is exhausting to do the live interpretation, but yeah, that is definitely better paying than translating a whole novel. Looking at the amount of hours that go into it. So that was the one little trick I had up my sleeve on how I actually made a living. Yeah.
Yeah, all such good tips. I would also like to shout out the Author Guild's freely accessible, you don't have to be a member, Freelancer Finances webinar. That's especially good if you've started getting work, but you might need to chase down people who are not very forthcoming with sending you your money. Also, I think it covers some tax stuff too, which is important. Freelancer taxes work differently than, jobs with a W-2, is it? So yeah, I think that webinar is on YouTube if you just look up Freelancer Finance is a great resource. And the Author Guild's resources are all really great. Yeah.
They really are. No, I was going to say, not answering to the how do you stay organized question, but still the underpaid question. It's really important to me to spend some of my time volunteering to improve the field and make it more equitable so that it won't be so underpaid in the future, so that translators of color might get more jobs, that kind of thing. So I do volunteer a lot, but to me that is an important investment in the industry. And yeah, I do try to be careful and have a good balance between my hours and my paid hours, but that is important to me as well. Again, the community, right? You gotta give back to the community. It is the only purpose to what we do, really, is to have the feedback loop going around.
Yeah. I think we got a little bit of time before we go to audience questions. So I want to ask you the really important question about this beautiful dollhouse that you have behind you. You and I have talked a lot about the importance of hobbies, and you have a beautiful one now. Can you tell us more about it?
I adore my hobby, though lately I haven't been playing with my toys as much. But yeah, I struggle to relax, as I think a lot of people in our day and age do. I am always wired and on, and I just don't know. I obviously can't fall asleep ever because I am completely wired all the time, very caffeinated. So I needed to find an activity to help me, fade out at the end of the day. And my therapist said it couldn't be something passive like watching TV, because that just makes you feel, slow. It doesn't engage your brain, your body. And I'm not going to exercise. That was predetermined. I'm not going to go running. So I love making things with my hands, and I tried my hand at all kinds of things like woodcuts and textile things, sewing and knitting and all of that, and making stamps and relief printing. I love making prints. But in one way or another, they all required a lot of equipment or things that I needed to pay for. And I was a broke freelancer, right? So I ended up using a lot of my trash to make these miniatures. So they're 1 to 12 scale. So 1 foot is 1 inch. I have show and tell. So I have things to show. I love adding details like rust to the corner of a lantern or something like that. I like to use like jewelry findings. This is a lamp that I used all kinds of junks. I had like a big bead in this, I think it's a pendant, and of course it lights up because
oh my god,
I'm detail oriented. I'm a translator. So this is my teddy bear.
oh my god,
etc. But yeah, it really came out of me looking at my junk drawer, and I had all these really bad pencils that I'm not going to actually use. They're freebies for my bank or something. So I might make a can with the ferrule of the pencil. I might make a little can or a flower pot thing.
oh my god. Can you tell us where you get the can labels from?
Oh, just from the deals stuff I get in the mail from my local grocery store. I don't even have a color printer. It's truly all junk. So it's very heavy, but I can spotlight my labor. So I make, like I made a chair with paper clips. Oh, actually, this is not very helpful. Like a little chair with paper clips. It's all very rudimentary. It's not that fancy, but I do get invested, and then it becomes better and better. Like this is my pantry. I loved making the bread. It comes out of the bag, and a knife. Like if any of you are ever interested in miniatures and you want to make a knife, for example, I will put my screen back. You can just use the thing from like your saran wrap. You know, it comes with a little blade. You can make your little knife that way. Just use your junk, the ones you already have, and make tiny things like a jug or a canister. This is my table, which has the world's tiniest salt and pepper shaker, which I also made some beads, and a French press that I made with a pen that had run out of ink. So, and this is just paper. I use a lot of paper. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. And maybe I can, it's incredibly heavy. Never mind. But you can.
Don't pull your back.
I won't break my back, but there is an Instagram account where you can see close-up pictures. I think the floor tiles, the details on the wall, like baseboards, those things add the most amount of realism with the least amount of work. So that would be what I would like to show off. Like, look, I made wainscoting with popsicle sticks. Yeah, but it's a lot of fun, and it is very much like fiction or like making life, or especially when I am making things look worn or rusty. You know, I am trying to put life back into what is essentially an empty house. And that to me feels very much like what I like to see in a book, or why I write, you know, like breathing life. The fake, it's all artifice, but to
World
me,
building.
real, yeah, very real world. I love my doll houses. This is not the only one. This is just the one I'm currently working on. It's very excessive, I know.
I love it. Oh,
thank
so
you.
much
I love to show it
ingenuity.
off. I had everything set up, not the books, but the actual, you know, important labor right here on my desk, waiting for this moment.
I love it. Oh my God.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Thank you. It is time technically for Q&A. So far, I have one request from Alex Zucker to see your corkboard.
Ah, okay. I can grab it.
Send me more questions, everyone. Let us know. Oh, wow.
Things are all gonna fall out of it, but it's essentially very disorganized. And it just, I mean, this is not prepared for showing, but okay, here's a chapter. I might have a chapter, the description of it written down, and then something to help me with, you know, tracking the time, or especially this particular book I was working on. The fall was very fall-like, the summer was very summery. So I tried to keep track of whatever details are important. And then I put them in order, but I had to put it away because my rabbit loves to eat paper. So this was happening, which is why it's so messy now. But yeah, so this is my corkboard. I started doing this. I went to a residency at Yado, and all the rooms there have corkboards. So I felt like I should give it a try, and then I've been using it since. Yeah.
I'm personally feeling very inspired. Jennifer, you didn't tell us any of your tips though. So before we get to any other questions, I, from this outside perspective, find that you are extremely organized. I do not understand how you are on top of you stay on top of everything. So please share your secrets.
It does not feel organized inside my head. But I guess like I use my email inbox as a to-do list. I have a very intricate system of different email addresses, completely separate ones for different things. Like all my newsletters go into one email address, and then my personal one is just for action items. And so I try to keep it pretty close to 0 there. And it helps me keep on top of like my to-do list from like my, 4 streams of work. I guess that's one random organization tip. Also, I would say, sorry, go ahead.
No, I feel like asking to see your inbox is a bit too intimate. So I'm not gonna go there.
I personally would love that, but
Me
later.
too, but maybe later.
I also didn't mention this, but I have about 1,000 spreadsheets. Like every time I submit something to a magazine or a press, it goes into the spreadsheet, and then say it's been a month and I sent them, a nudge, I will add that in there as well. So then just by looking at the spreadsheet, I can see who I need to follow up with. I also keep a spreadsheet for every book I read, and then I write down the name of the press as well. So then when I'm pitching, I can look just at the books I read and all the data I've already collected on the presses, and that makes it easier for me to write the cover letter, so just being organized with my spreadsheets, and to my mind, though they're very time consuming, is going to save me time in the future.
There's also something soothing about them, I guess. Well, it depends on your personality type, but I know I started doing my like submissions to journal spreadsheet because you told me you had one, and I was like, oh, obviously this is something you have to do. And then now I also have a spreadsheet for my income from different streams, and I make sure to immediately move 15% of my income out of my main bank accounts, because that's for freelancer taxes. And so that is recorded in my little income spreadsheet too.
Yeah, no, my income spreadsheet's so useful, because how else am I going to report the $25 I got from a magazine? It's just all going to get lost in the shuffle. So my accountant appreciates it.
We have 4 questions. We have several questions now. Alex Zucker would like to ask a question, and he's going to turn on his camera.
Hello, thank you so much, Bruna and Jennifer. And it's already been amazing. I do want to not to stalk you, but this question of sustainability, since it was in the description of the event, and neither of you have talked about it yet. So I guess it's like you've touched on it, but not focused on it. So maybe if you could talk, if there's a way to like bring that out, what is something that you do? I don't need a grand state, what is something that you do that you feel like contributes to the sustainability of your translation work?
Yeah, I mean, half an hour is not enough time to talk about this, but I think the dollhouse thing, the hobby thing for me is very important, because I was getting burned out really fast, especially when I had really dense prose to translate and tight deadlines. I could sense myself getting less and less focused on the work. Like, it doesn't matter how long I spent there, my eyes would just glaze over. So doing something else. Having a pet was great. Yeah, just making sure I remember I'm a person first, and a translator is someone who needs to make a living second. And the other thing for me has been to bond with people who face the particular challenges that I also face as a heritage speaker, as a person of color translating in the US, and having that community has been really important. It can be very isolating, the same way that being a freelancer, trying to enter the arts, all of that can be really isolating. I felt significantly less alienated when I just put time into this community, and I felt like we weren't going to disappear. We weren't going anywhere.
Yeah, I would definitely echo that. And I think community, definitely a big part of it. Also, like even just in very indirect ways, like reading translations by people I admire, really always inspires me. Because I mean, I think maybe it's like a little easy sometimes to forget that the people you're friends with, that you like make silly jokes with, and eat croissants on a bench with, also produce this amazing, like beautiful work, right? That's out in the world that you can pore over and just, marvel at what they were able to do with a translation or with a piece of writing. So that's, yeah, I guess when I feel a little bit like it's just, it feels a lot like work and less like play, in a way that I try to keep a spirit of play in the translation work I do. I think turning to other people's work is really always very reinvigorating.
Yeah, and one more thing I'll add to the sustainability thing, especially coming out of MFA programs, I had this idea a lot because of my professors partly. I had this idea that if I had to go to McDowell and all of those places every month and maybe teach at a fancy school and have books every year. And then when after much applying and trying, and I finally did go to one of those residencies, I was surprised to find out that everyone there had day jobs. The playwright also worked at an opera house, and the fancy visual artist who got a Guggenheim while we were there and we celebrated, she has an office job. And everybody really, and I was the only one who was just chilling while I was there and working on the actual art. And I think that was a big turning point for me. I understood that I was being precious about what I do in all the wrong ways, right? I was getting burned out. I couldn't pay rent. So that's more or less when I decided I would also just embrace the real artist life, which is, well, for me personally, in with the kinds of needs I have, like health insurance, I should just do 9 to 5 and find my joy and my pride and joy in many other things. And I am lucky that my work is translation adjacent. See, I already did that. My work, my day job is translation adjacent. But even if it weren't, if it was something else altogether, that would be just fine. It doesn't diminish what I do or shouldn't change how I feel about the translation or the value or self-worth, of anything.
I also wanted to pick up on a thread you just, so I often find myself saying, like right now I'm on the hunt for a 9 to 5 job. And I often find myself saying, oh yeah, I'm looking for a job, but I do have a job. I have lots of different streams of work. And I think it's maybe a cultural thing that we also have to maybe work to undo a little bit. Like translation is work. It's also, it can be really fun and can feel like a puzzle in really great ways, but it is work too. And I think undoing some of my own programming has been something I'm working on.
Thank you. I feel like I've been doing this for a long time, and I'm learning so much from you two right now. We have a question from Thais Hausa, who says, since Bruna's Brazilian, and so am I wanted to ask her if she has tips for Brazilians trying to get into the US translation market. I also wanted to ask if she has experience with the Brazilian market as well, and if so, what the main differences are, in her opinion.
I will answer the second part of the question first. I have no experience in the Brazilian market because, well, I guess I have this one. When I did reach out to the presses there, they mostly said, we don't care who you are, we have in-house translators. And if they haven't suggested that book yet, why would we listen to you? So that has been my experience. And I'm like, got it. I will, give my time elsewhere. The one tip I have for the Brazilians out there, or for anybody really, is to find your people. It's been incredible for me. In the AMFA, I found many other MFAers in New York and California who were also originally from Brazil. And then I'm like, I am really not an outlier. Why did I think that? Who told me that? I mean, people definitely told me, but, and then, it feels really natural and I feel supported and I feel bolder to just email the presses I want to email and do what I need to do instead of feeling all the time like I'm an outsider. That would be the main tip for me. You're not an outsider. Look at the two of us here already. This is what, 25%?
Thank you, Bruna. Then we have a question from Kelty Robertson, who asks, what are your tips for staying motivated and inspired when the creative juices just aren't flowing?
Jennifer, you want to take this one first? We've been talking about this.
Sure, yeah. I think reading helps. And I think we've talked about this, and I know for you, I think reading really does feel like work because you also obviously are novelists. For me, reading still has retained some of that like pure pleasure, and I think it's really nice to recharge. I haven't been able to read as much recently because there's just been so much to do, but when I had some lower work demands, I tried to carve out one day a week when I would just like sit with a book, and yeah, that would be my thing for the day, and that was really nice. Yeah, and there's nothing more inspiring than seeing other people do cool things.
Yeah, definitely reading for me too. And I also often, after I write and I feel like I've given the writing my all, I have nothing else left to give, I'm drained, I have this feeling I will never write anything again. This was the last time. I guess that's it, you know? And then I grab a book and I go have a cup of coffee on a bench somewhere and I start people watching. Suddenly there are like 200 paragraphs in my head and I get distracted looking at the grass or something, and there is so much to admire all over again. And then I will read a great book and I'll see a great movie and I'll eat good ice cream, and it's, you know, the well is full again. So yeah, just step out of it, step out of the work for a little bit. I constantly need to remind myself to just be a person out there. Yes, I saw someone, Alex, in the chat saying the outdoors. I know, in New York, now I'm in St. Louis, but in my New York apartment, my window opens to a wall, and it's just so sad. And then here in St. Louis, in my insomniac phase, I saw the sunrise this morning. You know, it's incredible. Even if it sucks, it's great. Yeah, so just remember that the world doesn't care if you don't finish your to-do list. The world will keep on spinning. It's all fine. You can always get that extension.
Thank you. Then we have a question from Annalise. Oh no, it cut out your last, Finnegan, sorry. Question to Bruna and Jennifer. When you are doing everything that you do to get by, your gigs, your day jobs, how do you maintain your voice in writing and in translation? It's a great question.
Yeah. I thought you meant literal voice, because I also read all of my work out loud and I'm constantly losing my voice. I have a lot of Ricola near me on my desk, but in retaining my voice, I don't think I actually have much of a hard time retaining it. When I need to tune my instrument, I just read an author in the original, or I read the previous, when it's my own writing, the previous chapter I was working on. I read that out loud and suddenly I'm in it again. What about you, Jennifer?
For me, I've found that it's really helpful for me to try to do work, like paying work that doesn't draw from the same well as translation or you know, more creative work. I haven't been entirely successful with this because I do, you know, mentor students on their college essays and I copy edit. And I'm also a assistant editor at a translation press. So not entirely successful, but it helps, I think, to not be drawing from the same source, and to like save a chunk of that for the work that I'm excited for, not because I owe it to, you know, it's due to anybody else, but because, you know, it excites me.
Thank you. We are out of audience questions, but luckily I have 1,000 questions. But please send me more audience questions. Actually, in the conversation that you and I had, Jennifer, at some point, can't remember when, possibly when we were discussing a project, you used the phrase, you were talking about how you were looking for a 9-to-5 and looking for different ways of making, you know, the money that puts food on the table, because you wanted to hold space for joy in translation. And that has stuck with me a lot as a freelancer. Sometimes I forget to hold space for joy in this profession that is supposed to be driven by love, which, you know, is a little bit problematic, but we can go into that later. I'd love to know if you're managing to hold space for joy in translation, and if so, how?
Right now there are a lot of deadlines, so right now things are feeling less joyful. But I think, I mean, that's fine too, right? Like it's going to come in waves. It's not always going to be, you know, I think it would be asking too much for something. Nothing is joyful 100% of the time. So there's that I try to keep in mind. I think I've been lucky to find work translating people who I like as people, whose work I care about, who's, you know, whose work I connect to in a personal way, and who I like have a larger goal for, let's say. And that I think is a big motivator. Yeah, and I just love the way, I mean, like on really good days, I'll feel like high almost, and like I'm having an awesome conversation with somebody on the page, like, you know, on the page, like translating, you know, certain poems. I feel like, wow, like this is hitting in spots that, you know, very little other work does, and that's wonderful. And I get to play with it and you know, move the puzzle pieces around in English to make it a thing in English, and that's wonderful. Yeah, I think finding work that you love is definitely very helpful, which is obviously not going to be possible all the time if you're making your living as a freelancer. But yeah, I think, yeah, I guess that's my answer.
Yeah, the work can get so grueling and like nose to the grindstone all the time. Being able to work less on translation and do something completely unrelated, like today I was helping set up an event at work, you know, has allowed me to say no to the jobs that are not that interesting to me and just keep the ones that I really like. It can still be stressful, and there will be bad parts like contract negotiations, etc., invoicing. But I get to now have a little bit more time to actually sit with a page I like, as opposed to can't even enjoy it, gotta get to the next one, which I've definitely had to do as well. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Anyone have questions? I can just continue. Happy to continue. No, no, one.
We have that
You-
question from you, Julia, about the ideal future of translation that you emailed us.
Yes, but we have 4 minutes to get through before we get to that one.
Oh, okay.
My last question before the big question then is, we're talking about sustainability, and you two most of the time live in one of the most expensive cities in the country.
Yeah.
How do you negotiate that? Have you thought of moving elsewhere? I know, Jennifer, you grew up in New York and you're very attached to the city. Bruna, you've lived all over the place, so I don't know, how is living somewhere else helpful when it comes to trying to create a sustainable profession?
That's such a good question. And yes, I'm really glad you asked. So I lived in the Midwest for 4 years, and I could only be a full-time freelancer in the Midwest. I certainly couldn't pay rent in New York with the kind of money I made. I remember when I got to 15K a year, I was so thrilled. I was like, I'm so rich. Yeah, so all this to say, you know, I had to start with really humble goals and then work up my income from there. But so I couldn't do it in New York. I left New York right away. Now I only get to be there because of my 9-to-5 job, and I have to be there for the job, really. If I didn't have to, I might live in the vicinity. But that being said, being in New York didn't do much for me professionally until recently. Now that I've worked with enough presses and I know enough people, being in New York, I get to see people all the time and have conversations in person, and it's just harder for them to forget I'm there when I'm seeing them at the book festival or at that fundraiser, etc.
Yeah, I would say, you know, I'm paying certainly not very much below market rate rent right now. And that is, you know, part of what's made it possible for me to, you know, I guess be a full-time freelancer for the whole pandemic. And I remember being really struck by something the novelist Ara Kwan said when she visited and gave, when she was doing her tour for the Incendiaries, she was in Iowa City and she gave a talk, and she said, honestly, the secret is that modern day patronage system is that you have a partner who can, provide you with health insurance and, who can maybe, pay more of the rent when a check doesn't come through for you and you, can't pay your part of the rent that month. And that, I think, often is how people manage to both manage the anxiety of not knowing, what you're going to be making in 3 months, and trying to live. I think Araquan lives in the Bay Area, which is, also notoriously high rent. So I think that's another part of it too.
Yeah. I've even had professors in my MFA at NYU who are like, you're in the city of millionaires, go find a banker. And I was deeply offended. I was like, wow, what a great feminist advice. So yeah, but if you have that, or if you're independently wealthy, that's wonderful. Maybe you don't need this conversation right now. Yeah. This is for the rest of us working people.
So what I'm hearing is choose your partner wisely. I don't do what I did and get a partner who's an art conservator. That's really dumb. Or have generational wealth. My partner is great.
Well, yeah, generational wealth I think is ideal. But if you don't have that, like, most people.
Okay, so the final question, which is the one that we like to give people so they'll sort of dream big, is what would an ideal future of literary translation look like to you? And you can choose who goes first.
We just do a staring contest.
You can go first.
You said I can go first?
Yeah.
Fine. I mean, I don't know that I'm even equipped to imagine a future that is good in a long time from now and productive. I kind of, the way that capitalism has worked for me is that I kind of have to take one day at a time. I don't even know which country I'll get to live in the next, after next year, because of the way things work. I'm always having to put myself through the ringer again and again to see what's going to happen to my body in the world, So I don't know. I feel like I would love to dream to do like the Afrofuturists and give you a very nice glittery answer, but I'm not sure. I guess one ideal future, this is something my agent asked, and she's like, okay, but tell me if you could just, do what you would like to do with your days, what that would be like. I can go that far if that's satisfactory. I would love to be able to just write and translate the things I like to translate and not have to do other things unless I really wanted to do them. That would be ideal. If I didn't have to think about retirement accounts, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, that the arts would be valued enough that what we do is some kind of service in its own right, and you don't need to do 80-hour work weeks to be, someone worth, taking up space on the planet. Yeah, so I think I'll leave it at that. Grand dreams right here.
I would say I would love to see a world in which, translation is more than the proverbial 3% of the market, and every book that someone is excited about as a translator can find a home at a press without, considerations like, oh, we already translated a book from that. We already published a book from that country or that language this year, and so we can't take your book on. Where everybody's excited to read translation, or if not everybody, at least everybody who is as excited about English language books that they're just as excited about translation. I guess that's my pipe dream.
And I guess that linked to this question is a lot of the endemic issues we see in our field as well. Like the field has to remain incredibly white because it's not like you know, everybody is willing to not care about having a good salary, right? And then not everyone gets to just luxuriate in books, etc. It's an incredibly privileged profession. It shouldn't be, but it is right now. So if, you know, none of that mattered and we could get proper pay and we could publish more than one book per country, everything would fall into place and look so different.
Thank you so much for that. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you again to the Center for Fiction for hosting these clinics. And thank you again, Jennifer and Bruna, for joining us tonight. Translation clinics take place on the third Thursday of every month. Please sign up to be notified of upcoming events. And please join us next month to hear Edward Gauvin and Alex Zucker talk about the constraints or inspirations that can crop up when visuals are involved in translation. The registration link is apparently in the chat. I haven't done that yet, but it's on the Center for Fiction's website. We look forward to seeing you again soon, and please stay safe out there.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.